Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Tonight we're joined by Rolf Nikel, he's former German ambassador to Poland, to unpack a pivotal moment in global diplomacy. As Donald Trump prepares to meet Vladimir Putin in Alaska, a summit that could reshape Europe's security, fears grow that Ukraine's fate might be decided without Kyiv or European leaders at the table. We'll discuss the stakes for peace talks, the Zelensky-Merz meeting, and whether Europe can safeguard its own security interests. Ambassador, welcome to TVP World, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure, sir. Now, the world seems to be holding its breath. What's the outcome likely to be from this summit between the two leaders in Alaska tomorrow night, about 9:30 p.m. CET? Your opinion, what's on the agenda? How's it going to end up?
Well, first of all, I'm a diplomat, and a diplomat should be an optimist. However, as a realist and as an analyst, I'm not very optimistic as to the outcome. We've seen a number of occasions already when there was a lot of noises before, and in the end, nothing came out. On the contrary, sometimes even the opposite came out. So let's be hopeful, but let's not deceive ourselves what can be achieved at this first meeting. This is already a big concession on the part of the Americans. Vladimir Putin is an indicted war criminal. He has never met with anybody important of other leaders in the last couple of years. So it's a huge concession from the American president to meet with him. And it would be very, very good if we had some concessions for that. However, I'm not sure that is going to happen.
Yes, I mean, there are instances which support what you've just said. So, for example, President Trump threatened sanctions, and instead of sanctions, he invited Putin over for a meeting. And both of those could be seen as a win for Putin. He avoided the sanctions. He got recognition from President Trump. What's the dynamic here? Do you think this is part of Trump's negotiating posture, or is he not really interested as long as the fighting stops? He doesn't care about what the optics are like.
Well, I think he is interested. After all, he is very much looking forward to receiving the Peace Nobel Prize. At least that's what he keeps saying. So I don't want to say that he's not interested. The question is, how long is he interested, and what actually is achieved? He himself, or his spokesperson said that it's important that this is a listening mode experience in the first place, and there will be hopefully another meeting with Zelensky later on. But that is pure hope and does not take into account Vladimir Putin's attitude. And look what's happening on the ground. I mean, Russia is reinforcing its attacks in the east of Ukraine, and they're even taking territory. So I can't really see any real intention on the part of the Russian leader to get there, sit down, have something, give some concessions, and really have this carnage stop.
Right. Well, he's taking quite a high-level team, including Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, to Alaska. Is that just a show, or do you think there might be something that he's willing to negotiate? For example, a land swap.
Well, the fact that Lavrov is accompanying him, the president, I don't think that's the main point here. The point is that he takes along with him other people from the business sphere. And I think the idea on his side is to engage the Americans into some business deals. There's already some concrete talks about certain things. And that is, of course, a big danger, that you sort of reset the relations between the two, between Russia and the United States. But the important thing here first is, of course, a solution to the conflict in Ukraine, to the war in Ukraine. And it's heartening for me to see that the Europeans have taken a common approach here. 2 days ago, we had this meeting in Germany, organized by Chancellor Merz, with Vladimir Zelensky present and other European leaders joined by telephone. And it was very good that those leaders came to a common approach. And it's very important now that this, if you want, European counterproposal is taking the main stage here. And
right.
This includes, first of all, a non-conditional ceasefire. Non-conditional. This is very important. There are a number of other elements we can talk about if you wish, but the unconditional ceasefire is the most important element in here.
Right. Now, I want to come to the ceasefire in just a second, but before we get to that, how influential do you think this European unity that you've just described is on President Trump? I mean, Trump's, the European leaders said, well, Trump took away some very important considerations that we presented to him, and he had agreed to abide by them. So is Europe having an indirect, if you like, involvement in these talks?
I certainly hope so. I'm not convinced that it actually does, because of the fact that we've seen this show before. Sometimes when we had talks with Trump, he was agreeing with it, and the next day he said something completely different. But the only way that Europeans can count, and when I'm Europeans, I mean all Europeans, including the Ukrainians, of course, we need to stick together. We need to be seen as acting together. If we don't do that, we have lost any opportunity and any possibility to influence things. However, if, as we were, united on this front, then we can achieve certain things. And I certainly hope that this has made an impression on Trump. He said so, but I believe it when I see it.
The other concern, of course, is that human rights abuses, the massacres, the rapes and so on, that the Russian army has committed, and the deportation of Ukrainian children into Russia, is kind of taking backstage, in Trump's drive for a ceasefire. Does that mean that they're going to get away with it, do you think?
Well, I certainly hope not. It is clear when somebody starts a war like Putin did, then there has to be accountability, and that means when it ends, that means reparations. That also means responsibility in front of the International Criminal Court, as he is an indicted criminal. But on the other hand, we have to see how this negotiation process goes, and we must see how we can follow up on these things, taking into account the fact that, first of all, this war, this fighting has to stop. This is the most important priority thing that has to happen. And I'm not sure that this will be the outcome of this.
Let's for a moment assume, Ambassador, that it does stop. Is this not simply an opportunity for Putin to consolidate his gains in the east of Ukraine, and say, okay, well, we're going to, this is a buffer zone, and we're going to keep it. Okay, we're not fighting the Ukrainians any longer, but we won't allow them to come in. And in the meantime, we're going to either deport Ukrainians to Russia or send them to the rest of Ukraine. I mean, there is that risk. Putin might agree to a ceasefire temporarily to achieve that goal and then continue with his war at a later date. Your thoughts?
You're absolutely right. I mean, we've seen that show before. Look what happened during the negotiations, the mediations that the Europeans undertook in Minsk in 2014 and 2015. This is exactly what happened. We had a ceasefire, contested one, but there was a ceasefire. And then Russia prepared for the all-out invasion a couple of years later. That is the danger. That's why the Europeans also proposed not only the unconditional ceasefire, but that whatever happens, whatever is negotiated, must have Ukraine and the other Europeans on the negotiation table. It is quite clear that Kiev needs ironclad security guarantees. The country did not get after Minsk. And so this is very important. We need to maintain a strong transatlantic position. We need a just and equitable peace, and that includes a number of the elements we already discussed earlier. There can be, of course, the territorial swaps, yes, but it cannot be that Ukraine just liberates territory that the Russians haven't even occupied. One can think about if it's done in a certain way. And there are diplomatic procedures by which certain things can happen, but it must be just and equitable. And so far, I haven't seen any sign on the Russian side to be ready to those kinds of concessions.
Right. Well, it sounds as though Putin does have a plan in mind, and of course the concern is that Trump will cave in to them. In terms of the other option, of course, is that this becomes a frozen conflict, which in effect prevents any talks of Ukraine joining NATO from ever happening. Now, in terms of security guarantees, how effective would they be? I mean, when would the guarantee be triggered and by whom? And, would cyber war, for example, against Ukraine by Russia count as an act of war? It's also full of challenges, isn't it? I mean, we have to be very carefully defined and committed to, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I totally agree. Diplomatic practice has a number of precedents that one can think of. First of all, of course, is NATO membership. This is probably the strongest and best guarantee. Now, if that is not happening, then you can think of something like Korea example, where you have security guarantees without a formal treaty obligation, and then you have the so-called Israel security guarantees, which is giving the country as much military equipment and as much military might as is necessary to defend itself by itself. So there are a number in diplomatic practice. There is a number of things that can be done theoretically, but at the end of the day, nothing is decided without Ukraine. Only Ukraine can decide whether these guarantees are sufficient to end this war. Indeed. Ukraine is the country that has been attacked, and it's primarily their obligation and their right.
Indeed, Ambassador. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your analysis with our audience. We look forward to seeing what happens at the meeting tomorrow, and we look forward to having you back for further analysis. Have a good evening, sir.
Thank you very much, and let's keep our fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Good night. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks, but as always, lots more coming up. Goodbye from me.